All right, awesome. I think we are live. Cool. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Probably stop my screen share and turn off my elevator music. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
My name is Omid. I run marketing here at Outerbounds. I have some people here on the call that I'm very excited to introduce. I'd like to start with Michael Balint, um, Director of Product Architecture at NVIDIA. Yeah. Berchin Boskaya. Did I get that right?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, Dev Evangelist at NVIDIA, and Ville Tuulos, founder CEO of Outerbounds.
Good to be here.
Cool.
Awesome.
So I am going to be your host. My role is to help answer some questions, but also if you're dialing in, I'll be monitoring the chat. So please drop questions. I have my questions lined up, but also help make sure that I get your questions answered as well on this call. How's everyone doing?
Pretty good. I can't complain. It's a Friday, going into the weekend. It's been a busy week, but it's all good.
Yes, sir. Yeah, TGIF. Yeah, it's a nice Friday. We had a very exciting launch week today. So those of you who haven't noticed, for those of you who have, thanks for joining in on the party this week. But we dropped quite a few exciting announcements. Part of the announcement includes an integration that we have, and we're going to be making some more noise about this here in a few weeks. But this is more of a bit of a teaser. An integration with NVIDIA. Today's topic is going to be covering NVIDIA NIM technology specifically. So very excited to ask some questions there. So yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in. Michael, oh, by the way, so part of my job here, by the way, for everyone who's on the call and for those of you who are dialing in, is I am to play the role of the dumbest person in the room. And so what that means is that I am going to be very comfortable asking some very beginner questions, and hopefully I can get everyone's curiosity covered. So forgive me in advance for some of the most basic questions I'm going to ask. And I'm going to kick off with something very, very basic and simple, which is, Michael, what exactly is NVIDIA NIM?
I don't think it's a dumb question at all. It's I think a lot of folks may not have heard of NIM, so really good to start there. NVIDIA NIM is really our way at NVIDIA of packaging up a model as a container and exposing it with an API. So it's really just as simple as that. We decided to focus on this because we've been working in this area of inference and obviously AI and Gen AI for a very long time, but we realized that it was quite difficult to package everything up into a sort of componentized, very consumable kind of thing, where it would be very easy for developers to start using this type of component, and the same kind of container that they could use to develop on could later be used in production and be scaled. So we were very keen. There's a lot of open source that we put out there for inference and for Gen AI, and really NIM is our way of packaging everything up into something that's more consumable. And then also, part of the spirit of it is to take control of your own destiny to some degree, right? Like there are a lot of APIs that are out there, a lot of services that folks will provide you, but we wanted to provide the bits that anybody could basically use and make their own services from scratch with.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. So my next thought naturally is going to be, why can't somebody do this themselves on their own?
Oh, they totally can. I think there are lots of ways to do it. There are I would say like less performant and more performant ways. There are ways where you can do it and it's sustainable to keep up to date with everything that's changing, and then there are ways where it's a lot more difficult, right? So really, as things have gotten more and more complex, that's where we saw the value add of creating NIM as a sort of easy button, like for any model that's growing very popular, we basically have a NIM. So you could think of it as a sort of driver, or a runtime. There's lots of metaphors for it, but like anytime that there's a very popular model, there will be a NIM for it. So all you have to do is run it. And also, there's an aspect of NIM where a lot of platforms are adopting it. So many of our users won't even realize that they're potentially using NIM. So the important standard, the APIs that are exposed for each NIM become the important standard here.
Incidentally, I got a question that just came in through the chat, so I think now's a good time to ask it. Brian's asking, so is it like Kubernetes?
Kubernetes is one deployment, one way you could deploy NIMs, but I would think of NIM at its like most atomic level as just a container that has the appropriate runtimes to load a particular model. So like, let's say Llama 3.1, 8B or, instruct. I want to run that in the best way possible. We include the right set of runtimes to be able to do that. We have logic within the container that detects like the hardware that container is running on and make sure to utilize the appropriate runtime to get the most performance. And then we expose the API so that users can make use of that running model. So you could run it as a container like on your own system, but at scale, you wouldn't want to run it as a container. You'd want to run it as a Helm chart or within Kserve or on Kubernetes in some fashion so you can scale it.
What are some example use cases that are pretty popular that you've been noticing with customers using NIM? What are they building?
Well, so since it's a pretty fundamental atomic building block, there are a lot of different things that one could build off of it. I think the most canonical or one of the most popular use cases we see is around building RAG. So we've built a lot of blueprints around that. So whether you're, you have a lot of enterprises, especially have, data, a lot of data at their disposal that they don't, potentially want to share, but they want to augment. They want to perhaps build like a chat bot or something that they can interact with their workforce can like interact with this bot and have it be customized to the data that they have at their disposal. So that's a very common use case that we see with NIM, and so you could actually piece together. You could use several different NIMs as the engine for putting together that entire workflow. So we see that common, very, very commonly. And I suppose that's like another reason why it's useful to have something like NIM is because, especially when you have data that you don't want to expose in some fashion, you don't want to push it somewhere up into the cloud or to another service. Like that's where NIM provides a unique value prop.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Getting a lot of really cool questions. I'm gonna hold off on your question, Vinod. It's a good one. I'll ask it here in a second. But there's I think now's probably a really good time to kind of introduce Outerbounds. For those of you who don't know about Outerbounds, this is relevant because as we talk about our NIM integration, Ville, I'd love to hear from you on what that looks like. What was the vision behind that? What made us excited about NIM specifically for us to build an integration, and how does that apply to Outerbounds and NIM customers?
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I have to say that like I've been like for the past 2 days at the PyTorch conference. So there was a PyTorch conference here in San Francisco. Like many of the core developers of PyTorch were there. I mean, there's of course a lot happening in the world of AI. Now, from our point of view, and like for those of you who might actually like even know much about Outerbounds, I mean, like we have been doing this for a good number of years. We started at Netflix, like even before the latest AI boom. And of course, like before like these large language models were like really in vogue. Now, last year, like when there was this like kind of a massive amount of interest coming towards like possibilities of using large language models, everybody, well, many companies like started thinking that, okay, actually, like how can we actually like put these models into good use? And then like there was just like a lot of confusion that, okay, I mean, of course, on the one hand, like we have all these vendors like OpenAI, super exciting, we can use the APIs. But then to Michael's earlier point, I mean, of course, like one big question there is really about the privacy. I mean, of course, there have been many questions about overall like the responsible AI, the ethics of AI and so forth. And increasingly, like companies are starting to understand that, well, actually, like if we want to embed these models into our products and into our workflows, I mean, like we have to really like think very like thoroughly that, okay, like what does it mean, and like how can we actually like control the experience? And now, of course, like one way, and as always with tech, I mean, and I think like one thing that's always like really useful mindset is that you can think of LLMs like to Michael's earlier point just as a building block, as we have always had building blocks like databases and like whatever, like Kubernetes got mentioned as well. And now like, you can think that, okay, LLMs, let's say, and like, of course, like Gen AI in general is just another building block that you can use to build different kind of experiences. And now again, I mean, like last year, many folks started exploring that, okay, on the one hand, like we can just use the API easy enough. On the other hand, like kind of if we want to have more control, can we do this internally by ourselves? And now, actually, like even NVIDIA has like really nice open source projects like NVIDIA Triton Inference Server that actually like could be used as a kind of as an ingredient, as a way to kind of start serving these models. But quite soon, like many people realized that actually like doing and hosting these LLMs really effectively is actually highly non-trivial. Not only it is non-trivial technically, but it's a super fast moving field. So there's very active lines of research like going into like I think that what are the best optimizations? How should we quantize the models? Should I be using VLLM? Should I be using TensorRT? And the challenge that then like we faced earlier last year was that like companies were kind of like between the rock and a hard place. And on the one hand, like we can have life easy, we can just use the APIs, but then we don't have the control. And of course, there are maybe questions about the cost and the privacy and like many others as well. And then on the other hand, like we have the usual kind of open source that like, let's build everything from the ground up. And given that like, anyway, there are so many questions about the AI, even at the application layer, then having to spend a lot of time at the engineering layer, like wasn't that appealing at all, especially because half of it feels like a research project anyways. So then like when NVIDIA started talking about NIM, like we saw that, wait a minute, I mean, this is exactly like what market needs at this point, having something that's easily packaged. So you don't have to worry about like building everything from the ground up. But on the other hand, like you have the control that like you can have this in your own environment. You can still benefit from fine tuning. You can still benefit from using RAG, as Michael said. But then like you can still like kind of have that as a building block in your own application. So in that sense, it kind of felt like the best of the both worlds. The other thing that like it's super convenient is that it's actually like really kind of like a no-nonsense thing at the end of the day. It's a container. If you have a kind of a container orchestration system like Kubernetes, you can deploy it easily. Of course, like for Outerbounds, like since we always run everything on Kubernetes, it's easy enough because we can just deploy these NIM containers as a part of that cluster. And it means that like customers can really focus on building everything around it, because this is another thing that's super important for us, that it's not only the LLM, but it's a whole system around the LLM. So now being able to just like almost like a forklift, like the latest LLM models as a part of your whole overall system. I mean, that's what's really exciting for us.
Can I ask kind of an elephant in the room? There's been some chatter that I've noticed on LinkedIn, for example. I guess OpenAI, I think, like broke some backwards compatibility, or they're deprecating one of their models. You know, as a developer, you spend a lot of time building things. I mean, I was a software engineer for about 10 years, and I used a lot of open source. And when they would end of life something, it was a huge headache, because you spend like a few years building on top of that, and then all of a sudden you have to go to your CEO and say, hey, by the way, we have to like scrap this project because we don't have future security patch guarantees or whatever, right? So I suppose maybe, Michael, this question is kind of for you. What thoughts have you guys put into making sure that doesn't happen for your customers?
Yeah, I mean that's another core value prop of NIM, really, because we put all of this effort into maintaining every part of that container, and the model files. I didn't really go into how we generate all of these different model files based upon the right set of hardware. But we maintain all of that, and that's part of a broader set of software that we call NVIDIA AI Enterprise, where we have longer term support. So while we for our LLMs, we've adopted the OpenAI API. We see it, being very, very popular. So we have to maintain for all of our LLM based NIMs. We have to stay up to date with how OpenAI is changing their API. But that said, it is when we produce a NIM, it's a versioned thing, right, that we support for a longer period of time. And so, if something breaks vis-a-vis the API, it's not like a managed service that you're using that suddenly shifts under your feet, right? It's something that you have control over because you can still continue to run using an older version of the NIM and the older version of the API, right? So that's the way that we're choosing to support things. It's the way that we do things internally at NVIDIA. Otherwise, I don't think we could build. It would be pretty difficult to build. It's like building on sand, right? You have to have something that's solid and supported over time, right? So that's a huge difference, I would say, versus like adopting a service that could just change completely, right, overnight.
I mean, philosophically, I suppose this is one of my dumb questions. Like, being in such an early industry, relatively speaking, right? Software engineering has been around for many, many decades, and lots of proven practices and methodologies and technology. I mean, the world of ML is relatively pretty new. Ville, this is also kind of a question for you. How do we take into consideration making sure that whatever people are building today is not going to be just old news in 6 months or 6 years? I mean, 6 years is like a lifetime in the computer science world.
Definitely feels that like in this field, like every month, every week counts. But no, well, first, I mean, it is indeed early days, like for everything we do here. I think, like exactly to Michael's point, I mean, the main thing is to have a stable foundation. I think that there will be so much that will be changing. And actually, like just on Monday, like we published a blog post about how we think about these things. But the main idea is that there are like certain things that are going to be stable, certain things that don't change that fast. I mean, like many fundamentals when it comes to building these services and experiences. I mean, in some ways, I mean, like we could even say that like nothing has changed. I mean, like you still want to provide, like, let's say, delightful experiences for your customers. You still don't want to break things suddenly. Like you still like want to, of course, like you have to be compliant in all the possible ways that you have had to be compliant before. So AI is not an excuse for anything. You can't say that our service is like suddenly less delightful or less reliable or less responsible because suddenly there's some AI component. I mean, all the existing concerns still apply. But now the exciting part is that, okay, I mean, like we do have these new opportunities. And the question is that, okay, like kind of on the one hand, like we have the responsibilities. On the one hand, we have these opportunities, and how do we match the two? And then it's really like finding that balance that, okay, like we kind of like, I mean, I guess it was the Zuckerberg, like kind of, it used to be like move fast and break things. And I think that like he recently even changed that, like kind of a move fast and like on unstable infrastructure or something like that. And that's really the mindset. And that's like really like the idea with something like NIM, like providing those building blocks that like kind of allow you to start like thinking that, okay, I mean, at least we have some stable elements. What would it actually mean for our application? And now I think it's so important to realize that still like kind of in many ways like a NIM is like an enabling technology, but I mean, still there are so many layers that most likely you have to build on top of them. Like, let's say, I mean, like just like doing the prompting, I mean, just doing the kind of whatever like you want to put in the prompt. It might be RAG, it might be whatever. And there are like many questions there. So it's not that like somehow you just take NIM and like you slap it in your system and suddenly you have like AI powered magic. But I mean, there's so much that you have to figure out on top of that still. And then the best thing you can do is to make sure that like at least the kind of the world doesn't change like under your feet. So.
Thank you for that, Ville. So I do have a question for Michael, but Vinod has kind of already asked this question. So I'm going to ask his question first. Is it compatible only for certain types of LLMs or specific LLMs?
Yeah, really good question. So then we associate a NIM with a particular model architecture. So we don't just out of the box support any AI model possible. A big reason for this, and I didn't get into this, so maybe let me explain it now, is if we're looking at, for example, I gave the example of Llama 3.1. If we're looking at a particular model, the way that we build the model file really affects the performance of, when we actually run inference with it. So we will run a whole Monte Carlo kind of simulation where we call them sweeps internally. And basically we'll build the model file using a lot of different build params and different combinations of different build params, and then see how that model is performing versus the accuracy trade-off. We have model files that are optimized for throughput, for latency, and then a sort of balanced approach between the two. And so to do all of that work, it requires a lot of access to different hardware. It requires obviously training a very specific model, because different models perform differently using different build parameters. So what we're focused on are the most popular models, or the ones that we see that are gaining the most traction, and then producing essentially a NIM for them. So it's not it's not that we would support every single LLM architecture, but we will support the most popular ones. And the good news is typically we see folks, whether they're they tend to use or want to use the most popular models, and if they're customizing or they're fine-tuning, or they're doing any sort of most folks are doing any sort of like domain adaptation, or wanting to create their own model, they're starting with one of the most popular ones as a base.
You may have already answered this, but do you only support LLMs? Do you have other Gen AI use cases?
No.
You guys
we have other Gen AI models that we support. I think the easiest place to go and see what we're working on and what we support is we have if you go to build.nvidia.com, we have sort of like preview playground where you can see all of the NIMs that we have exposed as like endpoints that you can play with, you can interact with. And then there's a subset of those that we've bundled up as downloadable NIMs. So typically the way we work is like when we're experimenting with creating a NIM, we'll first create the endpoint for ourselves and for the audience that wants to interact with it, and then later we'll produce the downloadable NIM.
Laura asked a nice question here. I didn't want to jump into pricing so quickly, but it's a fair question. She's asking, is this an affordable option for SMBs and independent contractors?
Right now, our audience isn't. I mean, I suppose it really depends, like what your budget is, but we're much more focused on exposing NIM through other services, through platforms. Especially, I think Outerbounds has you guys, Ville and team, you've built like a fantastic platform, and I couldn't agree more with what you said earlier, because it to some degree what we're doing at NVIDIA is hard, but it is the easy. I see it as like the easier part of the equation, right? Because we're making things faster, more optimized, keeping track of it's certainly no easy feat to like keep track of versions and and CVEs and all of that. So I don't mean to demean our own work, but I think it's really hard to take these components and build something that's very, very useful. And like out of Outerbounds, you can certainly do that, right? So that's more our focus, is like how do we enable I would say platforms like with this engine via NIMs.
Michael, I do want to ask you, kind of putting you on the spot, what are the alternatives to using NIMs? I don't necessarily mean to like make this more of a competitive Intel conversation, but if someone was considering an alternative, open source or commercial.
No, yeah, and I think it's a great question too, because like we're certainly not convinced like NIM is the only solution. You should only use NIM. We're trying to make it very easy. We're trying to make it, like, I would say, enterprise hardened, if I can, not, and hopefully it's not a cliche, but it's like, all of the hard work again that's put into like the CVEs and bug fixes and all the boring stuff. That's what I think is largely missing out of a lot of the other solutions in the market today. There's a lot of open source, and there's a lot of ways to kind of, you could just use PyTorch serving out of the box. You could do you could use Triton, that's open source. You could use TensorRT LLM. You could use VLLM. There's so many different solutions that are out there. Some are free, some are paid. But I think what's difficult, like the question we're trying to answer with NIM is like, how do I do this in like the most performant and supported way? So that's, on the axis of like all these solutions, like what we're really focused on is that, right? What is the best practice from NVIDIA on how to run this model in the most performant way? And I know that NVIDIA will support me, as things change and break inevitably, and there's, all sorts of security updates, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So Ville, I have a question for you. But before I ask, I just want to make it clear. I should set the stage for the audience who doesn't know about Outerbounds. Outerbounds is an MLOps platform that has effectively abstracted the entire lifecycle of building models, from the design, the development, versioning, deployment, and its value prop is to both the developers, the data scientists, the ML engineers, but also those that run infrastructure, ML ops engineers. To who is this NIM integration more exciting for, and why?
Yeah.
Or maybe both.
Right. I think like even like taking a step back, because they're like, I think there's like one side of the house that there's so much like research, like innovation, excitement around AI, that okay, like pushing the frontier, that like what can happen and so forth. And like to Michael's point, like many ways, if you are more like, let's say in academia or like exploring maybe or a startup, many options there. Now, like what we really care about is that also like there are many really kind of serious real world applications. Like we work with many companies in life science, like people handling medical records, people handling financial records, like kind of people, of course, like doing all the classic customer service use cases. Also, one thing that oftentimes goes underappreciated, that you can use these LLMs also to enhance your existing machine learning models. So it's not only like the fancy, like whatever, like text processing, but also like I believe that like you can use NIM to produce embeddings that you can use, let's say, fraud detection, like recommendations. The opportunities are really quite endless there. So now, Omid, back to your question then, that okay, as if you are a company, kind of like more like on the maybe enterprise side, a bit serious company, thinking of applying, let's say, LLMs, AI in general to one of these use cases, you kind of have two big questions. Like the first question is that, okay, like how do we even like make it possible for our developers to develop with AI? So, and like, of course, the easy thing is that like you could use these APIs, but like everybody, when you start thinking about it, you realize like all the issues that we have been discussing in this call as well with that. And then the next question is then like we have worked with companies who have actually already made a blanket decision that we can't work with these like a third-party vendors, like for, let's say, like a privacy compliance reason. And now like then like if that's the kind of a, let's say even your legal department says that we just can't do that, like we can't like send our data to whatever, like a random third party. Imagine you're a European company, you can't send the data to like US or whatever. Now the question is that like, what do you do? And then like you can go to your platform engineers and you can say that, oh, like we have heard that there are all these open source models. Can you just like run the open source models in our Kubernetes cluster? And then the engineer goes and like sees that, oh, now I need to kind of figure out the software stack, like all the things that Michael mentioned here before, like maybe Triton, maybe VLLM and so forth. And then like realizing that, oh my gosh, I mean, it's not only the software stack as usual, but I mean, it's a whole like a research project. And you start like go into like browsing the web and you find all these benchmarks. And last year it was this one thing, and this year it's the other thing. And now there's the research paper. And you realize that in order to actually solve the business problem, we can't do that. And the engineer goes that, well, I mean, we care about all the same things that we have always cared about as engineers, like which is high availability, which is security questions, of course, like making sure that it runs on our existing infrastructure, all that stuff. And I want to get the solution like as easily as possible that allows me to do my job well, which as an engineer. So that's the kind of the engineering side of the house. And at the same time, the developers like go that, well, I mean, like we still like want to use the easy APIs. We want to use various frameworks that are available that are compatible with OpenAI APIs and so forth. And then like that's the other side that like NIM provides. So again, I think it's really serving kind of needs on both sides, especially like when thinking about these serious use cases. And that's also like why we have been so excited about it, because to be quite honest here, I think like although there's a lot of buzz and hype about AI, it is still hard. It's still like a super early days, and like the issue that we see is it's still like way too hard for way too many companies. And like what we have to do as an industry, and I think like NVIDIA is playing their part, like we are playing our small part. Many other companies are like playing their part, is to kind of like make it so that like many of these questions become even more approachable, which then like opens up like kind of this like opportunities for more companies. And I think that's what always happens with these kind of a big paradigm shifts. Happen in the early days with the web, happen with mobile. It used to be hard to make mobile apps. Now it's not so hard anymore. And that's kind of like the kind of like a rising tide situation of like that just like makes it possible to start doing more and more like in a responsible fashion, like using AI, which is exciting for everybody.
Thank you for sharing that. I have some more follow-up, but I'm getting some questions here that are a bit more low-level tactical. So I'm excited that everyone's thinking about it. Looks like we do have some users already. Vinod is asking, how can I calculate the GPU VRAM requirements for NIM for a specific model? Is it documented?
Yeah, definitely. It depends on the model. There's a lot of it's a depends answer, but yeah, I mean, we have I suppose in our docs, like there are pointers to what the requirements are. We have a calculator. It really depends on like a lot of different factors, like the GPUs that you're using, how much RAM they have, you know, the size of the model, whether it's quantized or not. But yeah, that's something that, you know, if you're using NIM, we work with you to make sure that, you know, everything is fitting and everything is working.
This is a two-part question for Michael and for Ville. Raphael is asking, do we need to have a license to use NIM on-prem? And does that license include Outerbounds, or is there a separate license for Outerbounds? Ville.
Yeah, so NIM.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing is that we have NIM is free to use as a developer, you know, so we have a developer license, and you know, Bertrand can probably go into this way better than I can. You know,
well, that kind of addresses Laura's concern that she asked earlier for independent developers.
Yeah, it does. The way that we think of NIM though is as a production service, right? And there's a lot of hard work that we're putting into it, and I suppose like the value, the true value of it is the support over time, and being you know, able to call us and ask us for help, which we don't provide with the, you know, we'll push a lot of open source out there, but it's a you know, the way that we support that is like as whenever we get to it, there are SLAs, and there are you know, there's a different standard of support you know, with NIM. So if you're using it in any sort of like real product or production use case, that's where you know, we see the difference. And so really I encourage folks to use Outerbounds if you're on this call and you know, you want to build something with NIM, you know, use a platform, use something like Outerbounds that has integrated it into their platform. And then also the side effect is you don't have to bother with how to run it, how to deploy it, how to scale it. Outerbounds has done all of that for you, right? You just have you can just pick which model you wish. And you know, the earlier scaling question too is also applied, because Outerbounds is you know, considering that when deploying NIM. So all of that is like taken care of for you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then Ville, do you want to answer the question about the Outerbounds license?
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty much like Michael said, I mean, the easiest way is that you can go to our website, outerbounds.com, you click a button, like you can get started, and then the license is included. So that's a big part of our value prop as well, that you don't have to worry about it. So there's a flat fee. You can start using it. Of course, I mean, depending on the kind of the size of your operation, like if you are, I don't know, like if you are calling from Walmart, I mean, then it might be different than like if you are a small SMB. But yes, it's everything covered. And really, like, again, I mean, the thing there is that like over time, like imagine a world like where these LLMs actually like wouldn't have to be so exotic, that in the same way as like today you can take an off the shelf, let's say database, you can take Redis, you can take Postgres, you can take MySQL, and then you start building your application around it, and you kind of just think that, okay, the database at least should just work. Somebody else has taken care of the database, and I can focus on building my application around it. Imagine a world like where LLMs work the same way, that you use a platform like Outerbounds. Actually, like as of today, like we have a one-liner at NIM, exactly like you just say the model, I want to use the whatever Llama 8B, and then like, yeah, I mean, there's a one line, you start hitting, and like we have actually like a couple of fun blog articles. If you go to our blog, like how we do call the kind of a post on Hacker News, like a 350 million tokens, like push them like through NIM. Took about 7 hours, but I mean, like we were like able to produce anything, and building the whole thing, I mean, took a day, which is, I mean, honestly, like I've been doing this for quite a while, and I'm still like kind of still amazed at like how is this even possible? I mean, not the kind of a, I mean, the fact that the NIMs and so forth exist, but I mean the magic of LLMs as well, and like we can so easily use them now as a building block and like build these things that would have been absolutely unimaginable. I mean, just 4 years ago. I mean, not like 10 years ago, but I mean just 4 years ago. I mean, that's super exciting.
So before I get into more questions here, and I do have more, and I have some very exciting questions that I personally want to ask here. I want to make sure everybody understands how they can get started and be successful and feel supported. So for same question for both of you, how can you get started? And if you're stuck or you have questions, where can they go? Is there a Slack channel, a forum, a community?
Yeah, maybe I can start with that. So yeah, I mean, again, I mean, you can like go to the NVIDIA website. I mean, the important thing is that like NIMS, I mean, it's not some like a strange, obscure thing. I mean, like I think Michael mentioned it's like the build nvidia.com. You can find plenty of documentation there. You might find like many vendors as well, like who have NVIDIA. I think like just AWS had a blog post earlier this week that they support NIMS. I think like you start like finding more ways to do it. We have made it particularly easy. We have been working with Michael and the guys in NVIDIA for like quite a while now. So of course, like kind of I find it very easy to go to outerbounds.com, get started, and like we definitely like do provide that support over Slack. Like we also have the big open source community around Metaflow. So there's a like really nice interplay now between NIM and Metaflow. So you can use Metaflow for all the things around NIM, like getting the data securely. And then like in one of the steps in your Metaflow workflow, you just say that, okay, now let's kind of talk to the LLM and get the results. So yeah, so that's a super easy way to get started.
Yeah, plus one to using Metaflow. Big fan. I love it. I think you can certainly get started easily just running a NIM and using NIMs, and you can go to build.nvidia.com and use different endpoints, and you could even start building sort of like your own apps, client-side apps using those endpoints. You can request more credits. But ultimately, you're going to want if you're building something serious, you're going to want to graduate to using a platform that helps you build an end-to-end app. And so that's where I highly encourage like graduating from just using individual endpoints to using something like Outerbounds.
Thank you for sharing that. So I know that the Gen AI landscape is moving really quickly, and it's hard to predict what the future will look like. But is there anything that you can share at a high level where NIMs will be going, or any other technology that NVIDIA is looking at?
From our perspective, it's supporting more models, having more NIMs. Multimodality has obviously become it's becoming more and more prevalent, more popular. I anticipate it's just going to continue. Whereas you had different, models of different types. I think the trend I'm seeing is you're going to have more and more powerful LLMs that can do a lot of different things. Our focus at NVIDIA is also, building what we call blueprints, or like earlier the question was asked, like, what are some popular things that people are doing with NIMs? The most popular use cases we're trying to build into a sort of like canonical workflow. So that's another thing that we're working on. So whether it's RAG or, there are NIMs that we have that are focused in, for example, the bio or pharma space. So, common workflows around what you would do with those NIMs are also a thing. So the more NIMs, more useful workflows, and of course, like everything that we're encapsulating in these things, we also produce open source. So like the way to think of everything that we're producing at NVIDIA is we'd like to democratize access to all of these things. I think Ville and I are very much aligned in terms of how we think. Like we want to make it easier and easier for people to consume and build with AI, regardless of what level you're at, or what your like ideological beliefs are. If you want to build everything yourself and you want to do it open source, great. We will try to help you. If you're an enterprise, wanting to do AI, we will support you in the way that you want to be supported. Like that's what we're about.
I want to be mindful of time. I can't thank all of you guys enough for your time, and for the audience that has dialed in and your amazing questions. I have two more questions. The first question is kind of open-ended for the whole panel. Is there anything that I or the audience hasn't thought of asking that you want to share?
Let's see. Well, I mean, I always want to promote like my kind of like a favorite topic, because I do think that it doesn't get enough limelight, which is that I do feel that there's a bit of a divide in the world, that there have been people who have been building machine learning and data science systems for a long time. And I feel that like oftentimes some of these folks almost feel like a bit left out, that there's all this like a talk about like kind of a cool Gen AI. And, it's a very different world. It's a very different world than like what it used to be. And now it is also a fact that like most of the world still runs and will continue running on classical machine learning. So if you are a person like working on building fraud detection system, or like optimizing logistics, so building like a deep learning models to cure cancer, I mean, you may feel that, okay, I mean, yeah, sure, like everybody talking about the LLMs and Gen AI, but what does it do for me? And I think like one really interesting dimension here is to think really the combination. It doesn't have to be either or. I think that there are some people who say that, oh, I mean, like we need like we don't need XGBoost anymore, so like LLMs will do everything, which is of course nonsense, and so forth. But like it is a fact that like kind of the combination is highly interesting, because we have now access to unstructured data, and we are able to take any unstructured data set, like kind of talk to these large foundation models. It might not be always LLM, might be multimodal model, whatever, and then potentially use them then to enhance these overall models. So anyways, I guess like I just wanted to do like a shout out if there are any people in the audience like kind of who has been working on machine learning for the longest time and now feel that, oh, I mean, like it's the usual like AI buzz that like, yes, I mean, this can be highly relevant for everybody. And like what you are doing today and what you have been doing in the past hasn't gone anywhere. It's super important. And I think kind of this only like adds to it rather than removes anything.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, if I may just chime in, I think Ville raised a great point here, because I mean, there has been things that we have been doing classically, like traditionally in classical machine learning, but now we have this new world of LLMs, and there needs to be some kind of marriage, right? Like maybe that depends on the workflow that you're implementing, that may or may not include, of course, a combination of all these things. But the way we have been designing things at NVIDIA is sort of very suitable for the purpose of such kind of marriage, because like it's all componentalized, and so like the NIMs being optimized, for instance, for a specific model for a specific purpose, allows you to allows anyone, any user to sort of build more complex workflows, end-to-end pipelines, like RAG or like the digital human that we have recently released, which involves like speech to text, text to speech, among many other things. So, I mean, this is all going to a point where, yes, we have all these building blocks and components, but now let's build something more complex that address all these complex and difficult, problems that we're facing today in the world, right? So, I think in that sense, the way we are organizing ourselves in this world, together with all the AI advancements, will definitely serve very well in that direction. That's my 2 cents.
I do have a last question that I want to answer. I think we are at time. This question is completely unrelated to this topic, but it's kind of a treat question. And I'm also kind of being selfish, but the audience usually likes it. I want to ask each of you, you guys are all very brilliant technologists in all of your respective spaces, very accomplished. And usually you have insight into some of the really cool tools and technologies that help, make your life just all that much more easier. So I want to ask each of you, what is the latest thing that you've come across? This could be a product, it could be an iPhone app, it could be an application on your or a website. What is something that's really cool that you've come across recently? I will go first. I will give you an example. I used to be a user of Intuit makes it, I forgot the name of it, Quicken for personal financial management, and I found this app called Monarch app. Very impressed with it. Been using it for like 6 months. It's very beautiful UI. That's my latest little personal life hack discovery. Anyway, whoever wants to go next, go for it.
You have to say Outerbounds, right? That's the
It's a good answer.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Cursor, Replit. I think there's some really, really awesome tools coming out there in the AI space. I guess like personally, I've gotten into, I don't know if everyone here is familiar with like Ubiquity and Unify, but there's a really amazing ecosystem around like your home network and extending that and having cameras. And I suppose there's like a corollary there, because what's really cool about that solution is you can really have everything, all of your data, everything that you're recording basically set at home, right? You're not pushing it to the cloud somewhere if you don't want to. So maybe, what I work on, it's mirrored by like what I'm passionate about at home, I guess.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Cool. Well, I can say maybe actually like a bit of like a shout out to Adobe. I think they have been doing great work in integrating like all this AI stuff in their products. So just recently, actually, like Metaflow, the open source project, gained like 8,000 stars on GitHub, and I wanted to get this logo like filled with stars. And like I'm not the graphic designer like or anything, but I mean they have now this feature in Photoshop that you can just take a shape and there's a generative fill and then you say that, okay, I mean fill this shape with stars, and it does it. I mean it's actually like one of these things that I don't think it necessarily even advertises that it's AI or anything, and I'm pretty sure that like whatever, like the younger generation, I mean, will take these things like this for granted. That like you just, I mean, of course you can go to Photoshop and like choose that, yes, fill this thing with whatever. And like it's just like a good example how AI kind of gets embedded in everything, and it feels like a almost like a nothing burger. Yeah, of course. I mean, are you saying that hasn't been always possible, right? And I mean, it is actually like quite magical.
All of the Firefly stuff too. It's insane, right, like what you can do. And I see like a common flow from, going from an LLM and telling it to prompt, like helping use it to prompt, something like Firefly or some, generative fill, and like these workflows. Yeah, I think it's going to become ubiquitous, kind of like in the last 10 years. If you have a problem, go to YouTube or, search and see how, I think the younger generation tends to do that, right? Versus just searching for it and reading, right? Like a similar thing is going to happen here.
I personally like everything around like autonomous vehicles and how AI is helping us like with well, not entirely autonomous rides, but we're slowly getting there, right? Like with all the image detection, video detection, objects on the road, and driving smartly in that sense. I also like the how generative AI is helping, like in the creative sense, when creating marketing material, all kinds of interesting visualizations, astronauts skiing on Mars or something like that, or 3D videos, like we have Edify at NVIDIA that does a lot of that stuff, and so yeah, I mean those are pretty cool stuff, I think.
Thank you. That's awesome. That was Scooby Snacks for my curiosity. Thank you for everyone who dialed in, and thank you for the panel for your time. Can't thank you enough. I appreciate you all.
Thank
Have
you.
an awesome
Pleasure being here.
rest of your Friday.
Yep.
Same here.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.